So our final talk is on diversity, equity and inclusion, and we have two fantastic women joining us for our panel. First off, we have Angie Vo, founder and CEO of Women in Tech Forum, Angie, which is a global membership and coaching platform to help people accelerate and grow their career in tech. Prior to founding her company, Angie held senior leadership positions for world-leading tech companies including SAP, TripAdvisor and Mimecast. Angie has spent 11 years working in Asia and is now based in London, UK, where her company is headquartered. Angie has received international acclaim for her work and has most recently been awarded the 10 most impactful women in tech 2021 by Analytics Insight magazine, and has been named a finalist by the UK IT Industry Awards for the Most Inspirational Leader 2021. We also have Steph Marks joining us again, who is Head of UX from Bernadette. Steph Marks has over 10 years experience of finding ways to bring business, customer and technology together into products and services that deliver and delight. She has worked with clients such as O2 on their digital transformation and innovation, Domino's on their e-commerce platforms, and Saga on their website ecosystem redesign. Steph is passionate about diversity and inclusion and leads the Accessibility Collective at Bernadette, evangelizing and training the team in accessible design and development. So thank you for joining us, ladies, and welcome to the stage. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Have a seat. So it's great to have you both here for this fairly huge topic. And I wanted to start off by actually just asking you about the terms diversity, equity and inclusion, because they are umbrella terms and I think often interchanged. So how would you define those as they relate specifically to women in STEM?
So I think diversity, it's such a huge and broad topic, but diversity and inclusion is about making sure that all opportunities are accessible to everybody, irrespective of race, background, gender. Obviously, that there's lots of different, neurodiversity, disability, age. So it's about creating, in a work context, environments where everybody thrives and where everybody's voice is heard. And I think more importantly as well is belonging. I think a lot of companies talk about diversity and inclusion and are creating more inclusive workforces. I think the challenge that companies face today is once people are in the workforce is making sure that they are supported with the tools, the platforms, the mentorship and the allyship to be successful once they are within the companies and also to develop a successful career once they're there.
Absolutely. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Lots of feedback. Is that right? Yeah, diversity is about embracing everyone for all their differences and kind of relishing in that, I think, because you get so much more points of view and ideas, like working in web and app design. We just want to get as many different thoughts, starters and ideas from across the board, so really important for us. And then inclusion, I think, I sort of have two parts to inclusion because we have inclusion in the workplace and allowing all those voices to be heard and making people feel safe in the first place so they can share their ideas and, not be scared of failure or judgment. But the other side of inclusion for me and my team who are designing products is making it inclusive of all the customers and people that will be using it. So we kind of have an inward-facing view of it and an outward-facing, and that means working a lot with the customers who will use things. The word that we sort of missed a bit is the equity part. Equity versus equality for me is a very fascinating and interesting tension between those two words, with for anyone who doesn't understand it, equality being about equal opportunities for all, versus equity, which is kind of realizing that realistically we're not at equality and giving those that need a bit of a leg up. So yeah, just thought I'd point out that as it's interesting that the term has settled on equity rather than equality.
Yeah.
Maybe with a view in the future that it'll change.
That's true. That's the present phrase, and the future phrase is going to be equality.
Yeah.
That makes sense, I think so. So obviously we've touched on a bit about this already, but what would be the benefits or the additional benefits of having a diverse workforce in STEM?
Yeah, well, I think it's something I've touched on is that different points of view. I think diversity is all tangents of everything, like even junior people and senior people and people of different ages and backgrounds and all sorts. And for me, it's just like the wider range of people and backgrounds that you have in the team, the wider range of ideas. So it's always a good thing, basically.
Absolutely. But it's funny, isn't it? Because with women and men sort of graduating fairly similar levels, similar rates from STEM educational programs, there is such a disparity. Why isn't that reflected in the workplace?
I think there's lots of different reasons why women are not opting for a career in the tech industry. And I think, actually starts at sort of school and university where we're seeing, low levels of interest. I think it's just 13% of women are interested in pursuing a career in technology. And I think part of that reason is there's a lack of female role models in the industry. And, other than Sheryl Sandberg, there's a question for the audience. Can you cite other sort of female tech leaders? Feel free to question for the audience.
Maybe that says it all.
Yeah. Exactly. Ruth. Absolutely.
I'll throw in Julie Zoe from Facebook.
Yes, absolutely. And then you've got Safra Katz, who's the global CEO of Oracle, the CEO of Salesforce UK, Zara, and then there's a new CEO of Adobe also. But these are all sort of relatively new appointments. So we don't have those role models at an early age. So women and girls don't necessarily think that that's a viable career option for them. And I've heard lots of stories recently, it was really disappointing, from female graduates from different universities who have studied computer science, who were, very much in the minority, and they were excluded from group work at top UK universities by virtue of their gender. And that is still happening today from different universities. Which, so we need to have a wide-scale reform of the school, the university system. But also, I think businesses need to be more active as well in sort of working with, universities, students at school to actually show you can have a successful career in tech and actually educate them. Because I think there's still this perception that it's coding and really geeky, techie things, but actually tech is very creative. And, since the pandemic, pretty much every business is tech-enabled in some way, shape, or form. So there's a huge amount of opportunity there that we really need to tap into. And then finally, I'll say as well, it's the cultural norms as well. I think we're still sort of conditioned, this is a sort of male career, this is a female career. And, we need to start changing those perceptions. And then also within businesses, there is still very much that bro culture. And a lot of companies say it doesn't exist. I've been in the industry for 25 years. I speak to tech companies all day, every day in my role. And that bro culture still exists. Women still feel excluded. So, there's lots of different layers that we need to tackle in order to change that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, mentioning bro culture there, Steph, why do you think it is that STEM has historically had this homogenous culture, and what do you think we can do to combat that?
Yeah, I did a bit of reading about this recently because I was wondering, how are we here? How has this happened? But yeah, so basically, technology in particular used to be female dominated. So back in, I think around World War II, women were, the men were out fighting, and the women were working in technology and cracking codes and working on computers. And then, so it's sort of seen as a bit of a secretarial task, but basically fast forward to the 60s and 70s, and tech's getting kind of exciting and profitable, and basically the women got pushed out. They got pushed out either when they had a family, and women should stay at home, should be looking after the kids, or they were just capped, they just could not progress. So it's just crazy to think that. So I think that is why it's male dominated, because the women were pushed out. But now we're here, and I think in terms of what we can do, I mean, events like this are absolutely brilliant, but yeah, just building a more diverse culture in general, talking about it, shining a light on it, keep banging that drum until one day we don't have to talk about it anymore, I think. Yeah, and just supporting women in all the ways that we can think of, basically.
I think building on Steph's point as well about women being downplayed in the workplace, I mean, this sort of dates back over 200 years. If you think that the world's first computer programmer was female, so Ada Lovelace, 1840, became the world's first computer programmer. And, you know, there's been a lot of major tech inventions, you know, over the last couple of hundred years for women. And even then, their achievements were downplayed and they were positioned as the dolly bird in the advert as opposed to the creator of the technology. So I think we need to celebrate and recognize female contributions in the workplace, but also across the industry as a whole. And this is why Women in Tech Forum was founded, was to really promote and celebrate women across the industry.
Because there also is, at the moment, it seems, maybe trend's not quite the right word, but you do see more commonly people who historically have made big sort of jumps in STEM being now celebrated, which was unusual. What do you think about that? And is that something that you want to see more of, or do you think that, we should be focusing on the future now?
I think it's a combination of both. We need to recognise history and the amazing women who've created the technology, started the technology that we have today. Yeah. So absolutely, I think we should celebrate that more and recognise that, but also recognise that the talent that we have today and in the future and build on that. Because the more we can showcase role models and show that women can reach the top, or they can be whatever they want to be, we're inspiring the next generation and also helping others to break through the glass ceiling.
And Steph, obviously you've become head of UX at Bernadette, but how has your experience been getting to the top?
Yeah, it's been tough. It's been really tough, but I think having to prove yourself and really show that you're worth it and you're ready to reach a certain level then fills you with so much confidence when you come out on the other side. So yeah, lots of things that I've learned, and I think I just kind of seeing myself amongst the dynamic of other people at sort of similar level to me, I really feel like having a more empathetic side to my leadership compared to some of my male colleagues, I think it's such a big advantage. I feel like I have a real upper hand when it comes to like retaining staff, because I just have a lot more care, to be honest. So I think that's been a real advantage. I'm trying to take advantage of that more and more and sort of lead in that space, and yeah, put my stamp on career development and inclusion and accessibility and all that good stuff. So it's been great to kind of grab onto those topics when others aren't quite so interested in pioneering it. So just trying to use this to my advantage wherever I can.
Positive thinking.
Yeah.
Well, adding on to that, Angie, would you say, all of us, regardless of what field or specific job we're in, can sort of work together to improve diversity, equity and inclusion within our workforces, and also, I guess, society as a whole?
So I think unconscious bias is a big sort of topic right now, and particularly in the workplace. And 95% of our brains operate on an unconscious level, and that plays out in the recruitment process, both from sort of the hiring managers through to recruitment. So I think if companies are looking to attract more diverse candidates into the company, they need to look at the whole end-to-end process, from the images that you're using on the website through to the job descriptions, using inclusive language, the requirements of the job role. and then making sure that your hiring managers are aware of unconscious bias. Affinity bias plays out a lot. You hire someone because you look like me, you went to the same school as me, I think I could get on with you for after work drinks. So there are all these biases that play out which we're unaware of, hence why they're unconscious. So I think raising awareness of unconscious bias, and I had a session on this yesterday with our forum, and we talked about quotas and should we have quotas or shouldn't we? But we need to make sure that we are positively, from a recruitment perspective, broadening the net,
right,
and making sure that we're tapping into different diverse groups, recognizing that that process will take longer.
Yeah.
So I think, making sure that we're bringing people into the company from lots of different backgrounds. And as I touched on earlier, once people are in the company, setting them up for success. And I think this is where a lot of companies fail, is if you're having lots of different diverse groups, if you don't create that psychological safety where people feel included, they feel a sense of belonging, that they can call out bad behavior when it happens, and they are given allies, mentors, coaches so that they can succeed, then it creates more problems than it solves. So I think companies need to look at the entire process and create a platform for everybody to thrive.
I mean, that makes absolute sense, and I would imagine any workplace would seek to sort of employ the best person for the job, regardless of their gender, and therefore try and increase the talent pool using diversity policies. But then some people seem to worry that is those diversity policies are there to kind of exclude men or certain groups. Is that something or a feeling that you've come across, and how have you dealt with that?
So it's a feeling of a lot of men, particularly white males. They feel very much sort of, the world's against them right now. But actually, I think, white male allies have a huge role to play in being an ally to the next generation, in becoming aware of their biases, in mentoring, people from different diverse backgrounds. So, I think there is that feeling, but if you flip it around and use it to drive positive change, it can be very beneficial.
Absolutely. And so on that, Steph, what would you say was your biggest challenge that you've come across personally, and how did you flip it and make it something useful? And what advice would you give to other people facing challenges? How do they do the same?
Yeah. Unconscious bias is, so I've spoken about it before, and gender bias. I would say my own internal bias has been one of my biggest, challenges to overcome. Mm-hmm. Because there's all these inputs coming from culture. I mean, even it was only very, very recently that I actually felt proud to say I was a woman in tech, mm-hmm. because that word tech for me had been a masculine kind of thing. So even that, was an unconscious bias. And I'm sure some things today have resonated with me about feeling like I absolutely have to tick every single box before I can put myself forward for something, versus someone else who would just kind of go for it anyway. So definitely my own internal bias, I would say, against need to be perfect, need to do this, that, and the other before putting myself forward for things. But I think even now, just talking about it and having a label for it, that has unlocked a really great key for me, because then I can go, oh, hang on, that's rubbish, actually. That's not true. Step forward, or I'm not the only one thinking it. And I can spot things in culture that I'm like, oh, that's why I felt like woman in tech was shudder. We grew up with Barbies and unicorns. We didn't grow up with spaceships and, rocket men, whatever. So I can that's why, and I get it now. And now that I see it, then I hope to shed light on that and change a few things in culture where I can.
So would you say to people wanting advice with how to sort of get over that, the main thing is to recognise it?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, because then you can kind of go, okay, that's fine. Put it in a box. Don't faze me.
Well, now that you guys obviously are, sort of top of your game, really. Would you have a piece of advice for your younger selves who are just starting out in the industry and, you know, had everything to come? What would that one piece of advice be?
I think be your authentic self and celebrate the uniqueness that you bring. You know, it's the power of that diverse thinking that drives innovation and creativity. And I think for me early on in my career, you know, I was the youngest kind of director for a big multinational company, and you know, I was trained by men, so I dressed like a man, I behaved like a man, and you know, I was in this mold. And I think, you know, just don't be afraid to be your authentic self and express yourself, and that should be celebrated.
Brilliant. How about you?
I think reach out to others as mentors, as allies, for feedback. There's just so much you can learn from other people if you're open to it. Because I think when I first started my career, I was a little bit like, I can do this on my own. But actually, as I learned to let my guard down on that, just you get so much support. Someone mentioned earlier, like, you don't ask, you don't get. Like, just reach out and go for it and see what comes back to you. And I've always been amazed at what comes back if you just ask. So, yeah.
Be yourself and reach out.
Yeah.
That's great tips. I'm curious as well, though. Obviously, we've been talking about, you know, how we experience things, but in other countries, like EMEA countries, like, how is the experience there? Are the barriers, you know, and the sort of thinking towards DEI different?
It's a really interesting question, probably quite a difficult one to answer. So I've worked in Asia for 12 years, and you know, it's very different. If you go to the Philippines, the sort of females are the primary sort of breadwinners, so it's very different sort of gender dynamic in the workplace. Japan is very much, you know, male-oriented. So I think, first of all, it's really important to understand the cultures that you're working with, and understand, you know, all the different nuances and where you fit into that. So I think that's really important, and then that's your starting point. But I think it's really hard to sort of generalize across so many different countries. But I think be curious, be open. And also, we all make mistakes as well, and I think it's being open to that feedback, particularly when you're dealing across multiple countries and borders. So I think it's really important to be curious, be open, be prepared for feedback, and also to put the effort in to learn how to do business in the different countries.
That makes sense. I mean, Steph, you've obviously had the experience as well as working with different clients and big clients like O2 and Cadbury's, and international clients as well. So, you know, what have you noticed about working with those big groups? Are there any kind of common questions that come up about DEI when you're working with those clients?
I mean, hot topic right now is accessibility, which, because I'm working in, you know, digital space, and that is just across the board. It's just really brilliant to see. So, like, when I set up the Accessibility Collective at Bernadette, it was about 3 years ago, nobody was talking about it. I just had one colleague who was really passionate and kind of lit a flame in me, and I just thought, I think this is going to come up. I can just see it on the horizon. Let's start getting equipped now. And I can't tell you how pleased I am that we started then, because it takes a lot to upskill an entire department or company on how to design and build accessibility. And just for anyone who doesn't know, that or digital accessibility at least, is all about making sure that websites and apps and digital things can be used by everyone of any ability and in any situation. So I think if there's one hot topic right now, it's all industries, everyone's kind of going, oh, we need to do this. This is part of our inclusion of all of our customers and our staff. So it's actually internal and external of what are our websites and apps for customers, but then what about the technology our staff use?
Right.
Because then you're going back into internal diversity and inclusion policies, because you can't be excluding your own staff because they can't use your systems. So I think, yeah, if there's one hot topic that's relevant to me right now, it's that. But brilliant to see that finally it is coming up on the agenda. very high.
Okay, so I want to give you guys a bit of time for questions. We're going to have, we have lots of questions. So our mic is at the back with Emily. Maybe we start here and work our way round. Should we do it that way? So this gentleman at the, oh, is there, I'm sorry. Okay, we'll go back then and then come this way.
From the standpoint of a bright spot for COVID, do you think that, as I do, that there was a boon really for DEI to progress?
Absolutely. We've sort of created, I think it's almost sort of two different sides to that. I think in the beginning it created much more of an accessible and inclusive workplace for everyone, since it was all behind a screen, and you know, people could balance their home lives and things, so and more people were invited to the table. Conversely with that, I think now we go back post-pandemic, it's actually having a negative impact on women, because research has shown that women are choosing to stay at home and work from home more, whereas men are preferring to go to the office, which means they're missing out on these water cooler chats, and therefore, you know, that's when you hear about promotions. And so I think on the one hand, it's made it more, you know, the platform more diverse and inclusive, but at the same time, we can see disadvantages. I don't know if you have a different perspective.
I don't know if it's because of COVID or not, but what I have seen most recently is just breaking taboos, left, right, and centre. It's like every other day there's just something someone's saying. You're like, I've never heard someone be outspoken about, I don't know, periods, or I don't know what else there might be, sexual abuse, all sorts of things. Topics that have just been squashed down are all coming out, and I think that's a major change in our culture. But yeah, I don't know if it's been fueled by the pandemic or not, but definitely in the last year or so, it's like, what taboo can we break next? Which is very exciting.
Okay, I think there we go.
So we want to model inclusive behavior, and we do that, you know, at work, but sometimes we see bad behavior in the teams that we work with. What are good ways, you think, to deal with that when the bad behavior is being perpetuated openly? So you're on a call, for instance, you see bad behavior and everybody has witnessed it now. You're not at a point where you can take that person away and deal with it. How have you approached those kind of things?
So it's really interesting. I think organizational culture has a big role in how you call out bad behavior at work. So is there a culture of psychological safety? You know, is there a culture where people are encouraged to speak up and speak out? And is it regarded as a positive thing as opposed to a negative thing? Because obviously the fear is, what are the repercussions if I speak out against an individual, particularly if they're more senior as well? So I think organizational culture plays a big role. I think the person that you're calling out, if they're more senior and you're very junior as well. But I think there are ways to do it. So, you know, I would speak to the individual in question and actually say how it made you feel. But the key is to offer solutions. I always come at this from a positive perspective, which is I always assume positive intent. So something may have offended somebody, but they may not have realized, and it may not have been deliberate. So I think going at it with that, assuming positive intent and taking them aside in a private way and say, hey, this is how it made me feel, but offer them a solution, because they may not know how, you know, what language to use or how to do it. So offer them and say, actually, what would be better is this. And then it's a learning opportunity. So I think offering solutions is really important. And if you don't feel comfortable speaking to the individual, you know, if you have an ally, so we talked about, Steph mentioned allies. Allies are really important in supporting you in the workplace, and so allies can call it out on your behalf. And then also there's the HR teams as well, and particularly if it's systemic in an organization, then they can deal with things without attaching it to a particular individual who raised it.
I'd also add that I'm trying to adjust my language. It might even be a tiny little thing. I've stopped using the word girls at work. And it's like just trying to set an example, and when you learn something you shouldn't say, then just change it and just be a bit of a leader in that regard. Set a culture as well as call people out.
I was reading actually something, I can't remember where I read it, but about a certain company, every week they talked about the things they'd done wrong. So actually it was actively encouraged, and things that they'd done wrong as individuals or the wrong language, and they used it as an opportunity to learn and grow as a team, but also if policies need to be put in place, it was a learning opportunity. And then they'd have a prize for the person who'd made like the biggest boo-boo. And so it was encouraged. And I thought that was actually a really nice way of doing it.
Well, we do learn best from our mistakes, I think, don't we? That's
absolutely.
great. Next, I think.
You talk about hiring a bit, but what do you think companies, especially small ones and like not with like big budgets like startups, could do to hire women for like traditionally male-dominated jobs? Because it's hard to find women there. What do you think the advice would be?
So I think, start with looking at your job specs as well, because often, if they're entry-level positions, often there's lots and lots of requirements. So think about, the person, the transferable skills, and can you teach them it as well? I think so. Look at that first. And sort of, cast your hiring net much wider as well. So look at other places where you could hire people from as well. But also, culturally as an organisation, what are you doing to attract women? As in, what are your policies that you've got? What are your maternity benefits? How flexible are you? Because, in this age, pay isn't everything. I mean, obviously it's very important, but it's looking at what are you offering to those female employees. And we're seeing a lot, particularly post-pandemic, where they're looking at what are your values as a company, what's your purpose, what are you doing around sustainability and social impact. So I think if you're looking at attracting a particular group, look at what you're doing as a company to sort of attract that talent.
Do we have time for a few more questions? Great. So, over here,
Thank you so much. As Steph mentioned that reach out and find mentors, apart from your workplace, where do you reach out? I know Paulina mentioned, and I have already dropped a message. So is there, like, in your experience, have you found somewhere where you can, like, where do you find mentors?
Yeah, I mean, the kind of, not a mentor as such, but reading, learning from other industries is absolutely brilliant. It might even be friends and family and just talking with people at events like this or just through friends. It's amazing who you can meet just when you even just mention to people I'm looking for a mentor, I'm looking for someone in this. Like, many people know other people, so they can quite often put you in touch and give you that kind of warm introduction. So just telling people that you're looking for something, you tend to find it.
So I think also be clear on what you're looking for as well from a mentor. So I think step one is, what specifically do you want to be mentored on? And then I would start to think about who would be a good mentor. So typically a mentor is somebody who has a role that you want to be in yourself, who's been in your shoes, understands some of the challenges that you face. And I think, go and build a rapport with them. And that can be, as you said, as Steph said, networking at events like these, participating in communities like Women in Tech Forum, and sort of seeking out people. And then, start to have an initial conversation and then take it from there. I think it's quite hard to say, will you be my mentor with somebody you've never met before? Because you wouldn't go and ask somebody, will you be my friend? So I think it's... So I think it's building that rapport and telling people why they want to be a mentor. I think flattery gets you everywhere. So, say what you love about them, and maybe they don't have time, but they might do like a half an hour chat with you, and then as Steph said, they might recommend somebody else. So I think go about it in that way, but be quite strategic in your approach as well.
Great. Next question.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to ask a question around the nuance in the unconscious bias. Is very similar to what a question I asked yesterday around intersectionality and around the specifics of being a black woman and how technology can support us to not see the difficulties and barriers that women face as a monolith, but to be able to unpick the psychology behind what perpetuates the closed doors, because I think they're different locks for different women, and some are like tougher than for others, and especially then with the overlap of being disabled, black, queer, and we say women a lot, we say men a lot in here, but we're not saying, I haven't heard very vocally like trans or like gender non-conforming people, which, you know, I also am, although I'm a feminine being. So like these things can subconsciously and unconsciously also isolate some of the assumption of what these words mean to each other, even with all the best of intentions. And so thinking like what some of our, and especially in the UK, of thinking about what some of our like shadow, our collective shadow, even the language is different. You can say unconscious, I would say as an Indigenous woman, shadow, just like what some of our shadow in our like collective history, what we project on like a Southeast Asian woman or an East Asian woman or a black woman, and how we preconceive that they would not belong in a space with our body language, because and a lot of us can be differently intuitive and sensitive and creative as a strength as well. Like as I said yesterday, was invited here, but would not have brought myself into this space for a lot of reasons that I'm unpicking with so much. Like, it's a wonderful thing to be here and be like, wow, this is like essential for a direction I'm going in my career right now. But there are reasons for that inside myself, internalized racism, and also in like systemic, that I also dropped out of a scientific career. So it's, I wonder if you know what is currently happening in the industry, if there's any technologies or specific discussions that center misogynoir, like mixed race and gender issues, mixed anti-blackness and gender issues, mixed disability and blackness issues, and then broadening to other intersex, and how we can cross the movement of within women very specifically and practically address where there are gaps and who's not in the room and why.
It's a great question, and I think where I've seen it work well is, admittedly it's in bigger companies, is where they have grassroots employee resource groups to fit a very broad representation of different underrepresented groups. And where I've seen it work well is each of the ERG leads meet monthly together as a group with their respective board sponsors. So each ERG lead is aligned to a board sponsor, and they come together once a month, and it's open dialogue and conversation, and that's where you start to look at the intersectionality. But more importantly, that's where you're influencing company policy right from the top all the way down, and actually shaping the direction of the company and the policy. So I think, as individuals, we should speak up and share that. And as companies, they need to be open to listen to help shape then inclusivity, belonging, intersectionality.
We have a diversity and inclusion collective at VCCP, and it is all of that world. And they're absolutely brilliant at bringing like culture to life. I think what they do very well is, like, for example, we had a Southeast Asian event at work, and it wasn't like a dry talk. It was like, come and enjoy our culture. We're gonna have a great time, there's gonna be music, there's gonna be food, there's gonna be all sorts. I think so much of it is about education, and apologies on behalf of anyone for us talking about men and women, because that's something I've corrected in the past and then slipped back into, and it's all learning, isn't it? Yeah, it is a journey, and just getting involved. I think as an individual, it's so important to just like watch things that are on TV and go to events and just like get stuck into all these other cultures or travel, whatever you can do, and have fun with it. And then you just learn so much along the way, and get involved in everyone's backgrounds.
Brilliant. I think we had another question over there from the gentleman. Were there any other questions in the audience?
Sorry.
No? So last question, okay.
Sorry. If I may, I'm going to... there's two sides to inclusion, diversity and inclusion. And I'm starting to realize that when the white man, basically, that we always seem to think is not so much the problem, but when for example, I taught at university, and whenever we talk about, everyone thinks like white men, and we need to have, more diversity and stuff, the confidence of my white male students would actually get lost. And I thought, this is not what I'm not driving diversity and inclusion for this, my background is academic philosophy, and at a conference like this, someone come to me and say, you need to apply for this job, this postdoc, whatever. You'd be the first black philosopher in the country, whatever. But my female colleague, who was 3 times better than me at research, she was just, they just ignored her, right? I think like a white man, because of the way I was raised and everything. And my friends call me an Oreo because of that, and it's not. So I'm just thinking, can we recharacterize diversity as ways of thinking, rather than putting race. I know it'll have to conform to race and gender and background and all these things, but could it just be, hey guys, we just want people who think differently. Whether, I've met white men who are very open and inclusive. I've worked under women bosses who are as transactional as my father. So that's the question.
I think that's a great point. What someone is on paper is not the same as their approach. Yeah. And I think one thing that I'm sort of thinking about is, okay, my team and wider team might not be the perfect picture of diversity, but what we do is have diverse practices with working with the customers of all our products so that we include them. So bringing in different viewpoints doesn't always have to be that it's the people and how they look and where they're from. So I just think that's a great point that, it's not necessarily just having the right lineup, it's having the right mentality and doing the right activities that get you the inclusive inputs that you need.
Yeah, Angie.
No, I would agree, absolutely, and that's sort of the ultimate vision is where, we don't need to do all of these activities and we don't need to talk about things, but I think we're not there yet and we've got a long way to go. So it's about, running all of these different initiatives. And I think going back to your point on sort of white males and losing out on confidence, I think, again, flip it on its head and how can I as a white male be an ally to women, to other minority groups? How can I use my position of privilege to support others? And I think when you flip it on your head and use it to do good, then I think, everybody wins.
You're an Oreo cookie, I'm a coconut, apparently, so swings and roundabouts. That was our last question of our last panel of the last day of March 8 Live. Thank you so much for joining us, Angie and Steph, and thank you all for joining us as well. I think we're going to wrap it up here, but we hope you've had a fantastic time with us if you've been here in person and also watching at home on the Brella app. We've had a great time here at Tobacco Docks. From the whole March 8 team, thank you for watching. We hope that you can join us for the next March 8 event in September, and make sure that you check out the magazine at march8.com. Everyone with us here in person, we will have some networking area drinks, so if you want to come down there, and everyone at home as well, remember to join us for the next one. So from all of us here, goodbye, thank you. Thank you for listening.